What's going on YouTube? It's Tej, back again with another video, and we're covering more 2023 NFL draft content. And today we're doing a grade the mock Jordan Reid edition, his 1.0 mock draft. I can't believe that Jordan hasn't put out a mock already, but excited to dive into this. I love covering the ESPN, draft crew and their kind of thoughts. I mean, they're really tapped in, so should be an exciting mock. I haven't looked at it yet, so we're both experiencing this hopefully for the first time. But like I said, a lot of draft content in general on its way. Tomorrow I'm going to have my updated QB rankings from when I did it, preseason. Some things that moved around. Some players obviously didn't declare. So that's going to be a fun video. Come back to the channel tomorrow for that. And I'm even thinking about maybe even doing a mock draft once a week. So if you have any ideas of content for the draft season, or if you want to see a mock a week, maybe we'll do some live streamed. Love to have your thoughts on that down below in the comment section. How frequent is, how many mocks in a week basically is too much, or how often in a month maybe is too much. So let me hear your thoughts. But without further ado, let's diagnose Jordan Reid's 1.0 mock draft. And I mean, it starts with a pretty consensus pick, right? Bryce Young. I don't think I need to drone on this a whole lot, just because, this one just makes sense, right? Like, the team needs quarterback. I mean, hopefully, I'm saying this not even as a Texan fan. I do hope Houston secures the number 1 overall pick. I do hope they lose to Indianapolis this week, because as interesting as it could be, though, with Chicago getting the number 1 overall pick and maybe trading that, I'm ready to see Houston really get this rebuild, underway, right? Like, let's get Bryce Young, maybe draft a receiver at their next pick, and let's see what this Nick Caserio build looks like. So I'm kind of hoping Houston gets that number 1 overall pick, but we'll have to wait and see. This last week of the regular season is going to be an interesting one. But Bryce Young makes a ton of sense. Then we get to the Bears. Jalen Carter, this makes a ton of sense. Eberflus, prizes that 3 tech in his defense, and Jalen Carter to me is the best non-quarterback in the draft class. But assuming the guy that's going to go 3 is the guy I think it's going to be, you can't really go wrong with either one. So let's get some interior disruption. Also, you look at the impact in Aaron Donald, or even before that JJ Watt, who he did play on the edge, but that interior disruptor, what it can do for your defense, and just how much it can stymie an opposing offense, really is, I think something that changes the course of a game. Also, just kind of talking more about that, typically tackles are better in pass protection than guards, right? So getting a guy like Jalen Carter in the middle of that defense, and even just look at the division. Lions offensive line stout, but Green Bay's had some issues on the interior. The Vikings interior offensive line has been banged up, and not a unit that all in all is all that great. So he could also be drafted into a great division if this were to play out this way. Then we get to Seattle Seahawks at 3, and it is indeed Will Anderson. I think this makes a ton of sense. Quarterback, they're going to be a really interesting domino to fall once it comes to the draft. Like, if they sign Geno Smith to maybe a 3-year, $105 million extension, we'll have to see how that plays out. We've only really seen one really good year of Geno, and even this year was a little rocky. I do still stand by, even his low points this season are better than anything I'd seen in any year before. So I do believe in Geno at least being a capable starter in the NFL. But that being said, man, if they decide to let him walk and he goes to a Washington, or he goes to a Tampa Bay, I don't know, insert whatever team you want, man, this spot here at 3 becomes really interesting. And if Chicago gets the number 1 overall pick, is this a team that's thinking about maybe moving up to get a Bryce Young? I feel like they would really dig a Bryce Young. But Will Levis obviously still in play here. CJ Stroud looked great in that college football playoff. Really excited to talk about him in our updated QB rankings tomorrow. But I think opportunities are aplenty here to draft a quarterback if you're Seattle. But ultimately, I do think they're going to keep Geno around and continue to build upon what we've seen this year. But that being said, 2 rookie tackles look great. Kenneth Walker looked great this year. You have the receivers. This is a really nice ecosystem to add a rookie quarterback into. So we'll have to wait and see. Next up, the Arizona Cardinals. Tyree Wilson. So I decided to go Peter Skronsky in my last mock draft, just because I've been going edge and corner a ton. And at 4, I don't really love the corner class that much to go, that high with the CB. But, Tyree Wilson, and I knew Jordan Reid's actually been a guy who's been all over Tyree Wilson even from the preseason. So this is definitely one of his guys, but him or Miles Murphy, I think should be the pick here. Murphy kind of has that Trayvon Walker, build 6'5", 275, can play inside, can play out. Maybe not the most insane, college production, but that being said, like, when you're that dude, like that frame, and then that type of an athlete, you're going to go high in the draft. And then Tyree Wilson's, very similar, 6'6", 280. I think he's got some inside-out versatility. I think he could be a stand-up outside, rusher, but I also think he can play that 3-4 DN spot, given his size. But, maybe he fits better in a 4-3. Nonetheless, when you talk about the Arizona Cardinals, this is a team that needs pass rush, especially with J.J. Watt going to be retiring. they need edge rush and they need interior rush. Well, like that entire pass rush situation is pretty rough. So if they go Tyree Wilson or Miles Murphy here, I don't hate it. I think I'd prefer Murphy here. But otherwise, I think Jordan Reed's off to a really good start here. Then we get to Indianapolis Colts, CJ Stroud. So actually, we can go ahead and talk about it, man. For a guy who, I say this all the time, like when the situation is good, CJ Stroud is really, really good because the dude's got good arm strength. Maybe not the most impressive in this class, like not a Will Levis or anything like that. But solid enough arm strength, and his accuracy can be pinpoint. He can make just about any throw from that perspective, but he's got to have a clean pocket, in my opinion. And he plays with some of the best receivers in football, including Marvin Harrison Jr., right? A guy who, if he could come out this year, would be my wide receiver one and, easy front runner for the 2024 wide receiver one position. So that certainly helps. And then Ryan Day is a great offensive mind, and, that scheme in and of itself is awesome. But that being said, you go to the college football playoff and 19 dropbacks under pressure, where he's really struggled this year was against pressure. Damn, he looked good in the college football playoff. I mean, against a really good defense. Not that needed to be said, of course. But man, I was thoroughly impressed with what I saw. And a lot of it was doing it off script too. So like, not only was he good against pressure, like a play would break down, like that first touchdown to Marvin Harrison Jr. encapsulates something I just haven't seen from CJ Stroud a lot this year. He escapes the pocket, keeps his eyes downfield, and then you're looking in the direction of the best receiver in the country, in my opinion, spins away and gets open, and then boom, throws on the money. So like little things like that we just haven't gotten to see yet. Stroud put that to tape, and he did it in the biggest game of his season, and in a game where, it took a hell of a Georgia comeback to win that game. So, Stroud really, really impressed. Now, I still think he's going to, little spoiler here, he's still going to be QB3 for me. I think I still lean towards the traits of a Will Levis, but man, right as I started to think, Levis is going to be my 2, I'm feeling pretty certain about that. I watched that college football game and I'm like, damn, CJ Stroud's starting to take away the excuses and the reasons I've been maybe a little hesitant on him. So if he goes 5 here, the Colts, and even this situation, right? Like you have a wide receiver 1 in Michael Pittman. Alec Pierce has been better than I thought. That offensive line has maybe disappointed a little bit this year, but in theory, it should be a pretty good unit. That could be a situation, depending on the coach, that makes a ton of sense. And well, to see, I think, of course, Jim Harbaugh is going to be linked to this job, former Colts quarterback. I think he wants to get back to the NFL level. He's had conversations with Dave Tepper, though. Didn't describe it as an interview with Carolina. So the Jim Harbaugh sweepstakes are back in full force. We'll have to see where he goes. But if he ends up in Indianapolis, man, that would be a really fun story. The Ohio State quarterback, the former Michigan coach. This could also happen in Carolina for all we know. So we'll have to wait and see. But Stroud as Reed's QB2, I think, is really interesting, especially coming off that college football playoff game. Then we get to the Lions. Brian Brzee, I really like this draft pick. You can keep Ali McNeil at the nose tackle, where I think he's best suited. And I think he's a potentially really dynamic pass rusher from that nose spot. But also, this is a team that, James Houston's been great. A really fun story there. Aiden Hutchinson is starting to have the pass rush production follow suit. Let's just keep adding to that, right? And then I'd be interested to see what he's going to do with that second pick. Because I think you have to look at these 2 draft picks for the Lions in tandem, which is tough for them because the board, you have to play the board as it comes to you. So we'll just see how it ultimately plays out on draft night, right? Like, I'd love to see them add some pass rush and some cornerback depth, or maybe even corner, and then Trenton Simpson or something like that, and then maybe lean on those pass rushes they already have. But if they go Brian Brzee here, add that interior, pass rush, I think it's a great add, and then we'll have to see what they do with that second pick. But an unbelievable athlete. A lot of the same stuff I said about Miles Murphy is applicable here to Brian Brzee. Next up, the Vegas Raiders. And if this happens, I'm here for it, man. I just think the storylines of this would be awesome. It feels like they're moving on from Derek Carr. So then the question becomes, okay, well, Josh McDaniels, what's your alternative, right? And Dave Ziegler, the GM, like, okay, if not Carr, then how are we going to do better? And of course, naturally, it's like, could they get Aaron Rodgers? Reunite him with Devontae Adams? I don't think he's leaving Green Bay. So that's probably off the table. Tom Brady, maybe, single guy, maybe wants to live in Vegas for a little bit. That could be fun. Also reunite him with McDaniels and Ziegler. The easiest route's probably taking a quarterback. Now, we'll have to see how Week 18 plays out, right? Like, if the Raiders, lose, they might be even picking even higher than this. And then, maybe if the Colts beat Houston, they could be as high as, that 5th overall slot. So they'll have the choice of Stroud or Levis potentially. It'd be interesting to see who their top choice would be in that spot. But maybe the Raiders pull off an upset win and the Falcons lose. And then next thing you know, they're picking at like 9 or 10 and they're out of the sweepstakes. So Week 18 still is going to have a huge impact in this draft order. But man, Will Levis to the Raiders, it'd be interesting to see how Devontae Adams takes that news, right? But that could be really awesome. And realistically, I don't think Rodgers leaves Green Bay. Brady could be an option, but I really don't see that as the most likely outcome. So drafting a quarterback feels like the way that the Raiders are going to have to play this upcoming offseason. Next up, the Atlanta Falcons, Myles Murphy. This feels like a slam dunk. If he falls to 8, I think this is a great place for him to land. Also a team that's, not like next year's the Falcons year, right? So this is a great spot for him. As we kind of talked about, awesome size, great athlete, but the production's not really there. And he is raw from a pass rush perspective, doesn't have a whole lot of moves on tape. And the more you watch it, you're just kind of like, man, you're really leaning into that, athleticism and body frame. And I know you could do it in high school, and he's gotten away with it a little bit at the college level, but not, he didn't become a Bosa with, you look at his athleticism, and the same thing could have been said about Travon Walker last year. It's like, okay, well, if you're that big and you're that good of an athlete, why didn't you take games over? So I'd be really interested to see what happens when he gets to the NFL level. Back to my original point, next year's not the Falcons' year, so he'll have a year or two to really kind of hone in that pass rush skills. I think he's already a pretty high-level run defender, which, hey, if you're the Falcons fan, you'll take that right away as well. So a lot of Travon Walker, kind of comparisons here. High floor when it comes to run defender, some work to be done as a pass rusher, and an insane, frame and athletic profile makes Myles Murphy to me a lock for the top 10. But crazier things have happened. So really love that fit. The Falcons need more pass rush. I think this is a great add. Then we get to the Carolina Panthers, Anthony Richardson. So 4 quarterbacks in the top 9 for Jordan Reid, and the more I spend time thinking about it, like the top 3, in my opinion, with Young, Levis, and Stroud, they feel as safe a top 10 pick as I think, especially when you look at the top 10 with so many different teams contemplating quarterback as an option. Yeah, I have a hard time taking one of those 3 guys, especially with how good Stroud looked on Saturday. I have a hard time thinking those 3 don't go in the top 10. And then Richardson's the ultimate wild card, man. Like, I can see him, I look at the Commanders and the Giants in the early 20s, and I'm like, yeah, that's the floor. But if you're Carolina at 9 and the other top 3 are gone, I could buy this. Like, I could see them saying, it depends on who the head coach is going to be, what they want to do, what the offense is going to be, yada, yada, yada. But I could totally see this as an outcome where it's like, hey, we've got to get that position figured out. And this guy, ceiling-wise, the potential's there. So it may, maybe a little rough. Maybe we need a bridge option. Maybe we sign a Jacoby Brissett or, something like that. All that could be in play. Or, hey, I'd be interested to see. This team's already been running the ball pretty well. Do you just embrace, hey, Anthony Richardson's going to be spotty as a passer, but, DJ Moore can be a weapon in the yak component of the offense. And then, rushing quarterback, let's just raise our floor, lean into a good offensive line that's been run blocking really well, and we'll have him, Jubal Hubbard, and Donta Foreman kind of take us home. That could be interesting. And it's a defense with some pieces in place. I could be entertained by that, but it'd be interesting to see how a team, especially if you draft in the top 10, like bridge option, is he starting right away? I think he's raw, but that being said, you see the flashes on tape, right? Like, and it's not even like, wow, that throw is unbelievable. Like, it's not just like the arm strength, and it's not just, the running ability. There are times when the technique's there, man. Like, he has a perfect throwing motion, and he'll deliver a dot down the field. Like, he's not a Malik Willis, so it's a different situation. So if he goes in the top 10, I'd be interested to see how a team approaches that in the offseason. But hey, if the top 3 are gone and you're Carolina at 9, I think you might have to pull the trigger here. So I'm glad that Jordan put 4 quarterbacks in the top 9, because we may well see that. Let's talk about the Tennessee Titans. Their pick 10. Peter Skoronski, I think this is a great addition. I've been going heavy with Paris Johnson Jr. He's my offensive tackle 1 in this class. But that being said, Peter Skoronski, especially if they did decide, hey, we're going to keep Taylor Lewan around, I think he's going to end up being a cap casualty next offseason. But let's just say a world where, hey, we're going to keep Taylor Lewan. Peter Skoronski, I think, fills in perfectly then at left guard. And then if Lewan gets hurt, you have a contingency plan right there next to him in place that can kick over and play tackle. And then long term, he's your left tackle of the future. So this could be a Tyler Smith type of situation here for Tennessee. And, I think this is an overall win, right? Improve that pass protection, but also put a big smile on Derrick Henry's face by addressing that offensive line and get better there. This is a great long-term play, but also a great, immediate play, I think, for the Tennessee Titans. Then pick number 11, Jared Verse to the Philadelphia Eagles. Man, that could be spicy. Ultimately, I think that the order, the way my edge ranking is going to play out, if it were me making these selections, it would have been Murphy that goes forward to Arizona, and then it would have been Verse who goes to Atlanta at 8. So this could easily be Tyree Wilson, which I would love to see Tyree Wilson end up in Philadelphia. That said, Jared Verse on the Eagles might not be fair. They just traded for this, speed edge rusher in Robert Quinn. Now they could potentially draft a guy and have him for, 4+ years, 5th years, if they want to pick up that option. That could be dangerous, man. And this is a guy who's already, changed his body while he was in college, made a leap from the FCS level at Albany to then be, especially in the first 4 weeks of this season at Florida State, a guy who put a lot of top 10 type of play on his tape. So I know he got banged up, and the injuries could be a concern. Is he always going to be battling those? That's fair. The 1 year we got to see him at Florida State, he did get injured midway through. That's not something that he's going to pat his back on. There's not going to be a point of pride. But man, those first 4 or 5 weeks of the year, he looked like a stud. So Philadelphia always prides themselves on having these edge rushers. So I can see it, man. And Bijan, I think, starts to enter the conversation here. NFL teams are going to like him, man. So despite how you feel about running backs going in the first round, I also think that could be an option here for Philadelphia. But I love the value on Jared Verse there. Next up, Houston Texans. Quentin Johnston, love his pick. Bryce Young, Quentin Johnston. I mean, to me, Johnston right now, wide receiver 1 for me. Just comes down, do you want the upside of Johnston or the floor of Jordan Addison? That's for you to decide. But yeah, big on this Quentin Johnston ad here. And especially if you're going to move on from Brandon Cooks, who could be that big play, deep threat guy? Quentin Johnston is that, but he's also a machine yards after the catch wise. Like, this guy is so slippery and hard to break down, which is amazing because he's 6'4", 230. But he's going to run, I think, high 4.3s, but at worst, low 4.4s, so the speed's there as well. And we really got to see it this past weekend against Michigan. I mean, the dude, I don't want to say he took the game over, but he's a huge reason why TCU still has 1 game left to be played this upcoming season. So I love that addition. It's a position in need. Pairing him up with Bryce Young will be a fun storyline of the future if it were to play out that way. Then we get to the New York Jets. Paris Johnson Jr. I also love this. Paris Johnson Jr., my OT1. This is a team that's probably going to be shopping Mekhi Becton, or even if they keep him, right, like George Fant, Dwayne Brown, that was really meant to be a 1-year contract. So it gives you just some options moving forward at tackle. He's also played a year at right guard, so you have the option to play him on the interior, which granted, you're paying a lot of money to Laken Thompson. You just drafted AVT in the first round, Elijah Vera Tucker, if the AVT doesn't hit home and you're wondering who that is. Those guys, I think, are your guards for the future. So this just gives you the flexibility of saying, hey, like George Fant, we're going to go ahead and let you go. Or we are going to trade a Mekhi Becton and try to get a second round pick or whatever the value ends up being for him. And it's going to be Paris Johnson Jr. at right tackle and George Fant at left, or vice versa. So I just think this kind of gives you options based off how the Jets offseason might end up playing out. So I love this, and I think 13th are around a good spot for Paris Johnson Jr. to end up being drafted at. Washington Commanders at 14. The more I think about it, I think Joey Porter Jr. is going to be my CB1. We'll see. There's still some time before I make that video, so don't hold me to it. But man, I love this kid. The more I watch, I'm just like, yeah, this guy might be my favorite corner. Guys, and that's where it's tough. It's like my favorite or truly the best in my eyes. So I'm trying to eliminate my bias, but him going to Washington would be great. I really dig this fit. I think Benjamin St. Juste has made some strides this year. But after moving on from William Jackson, it does feel like that bounded corner spot is still a place where they can get better. And if you were to tell me, like, hey, St. Juste is hitting his stride, and Joey Porter Jr. has done nothing but get better year over year at Penn State, if he's competent as a rookie, I'm looking at that DB duo and that cornerback duo in specific moving forward for Washington, St. Juste and Porter. I'm like, man, that could be scary. With that pass rush, 2 shutdown corners, and that pass rush, all of a sudden the Commanders' defense is going to be a force to be reckoned with. So I'm totally here for it. Now, obviously, we're leaning on a lot of ifs there, right? Does Joey Porter turn it into the stud I think it could be? And does Benjamin St. Juste keep it up? A lot of questions that need answers there. But, man, if we're talking potential, Washington, if they added Joey Porter Jr., could be a very, very legit defense moving forward. Patriots, Broderick Jones. I like this addition. A guy who's a little raw when it comes to like how many pass blocking sets he's had during his time at Georgia. First year starter at UGA this year, but didn't allow a sack, which is a great feather in his cap. And he's also a really good run blocker. So for a team that's going to be likely trading a former Georgia tackle and Isaiah Wynn, this kind of makes sense to bring him in. And you also come with a little bit of flexibility. I'd imagine if they made this move, I wouldn't be surprised if they moved Broderick Jones over to right tackle and keep Trent Brown at left, just because, again, he's a little raw as a pass protector. So probably rather not have that be on Mac Jones, a very immobile quarterback. So I'd probably not want the raw pass protector on his blind side, right? So you still have some options there across the offensive line, but I think this is a great, addressing a position in need, but also you could argue this is BPA here in the middle of the first round for New England. Then we get to the Seattle Seahawks. Trenton Simpson. I don't think I've done this in any of my mocks, but totally makes sense, right? Like, safety skill set in the linebacker body. Jordan Brooks, late season injury too. That's really unfortunate. He might miss all of next year. We'll see. These ACL injuries, their timetables can be so variable, so it can be hard to tell. But that being said, if he does miss time, then you're talking about Trenton Simpson being a pretty pivotal player in the middle of that defense next year. But in a perfect world, you're getting Jordan Brooks back pretty early on, and you got Trent Simpson. All of a sudden, that's going back to Legion of Boom. Like, that's the Bobby Wagner, and the other name is escaping me. Played in the league for so long, continue to linger around. But anyways, that aside, I think that's how you get back to, Seattle being that legit defense, great at all three levels. I think Trent Simpson could bring that, great in coverage too. And I'd be interested to see how this might free up Jamal Adams, right? Like, Ryan Neal's been awesome. Quandre Diggs is a really good free safety. And then if you feel good about your linebacker spot, like, what are you going to do with Jamal Adams, right? Is he kind of just playing that big nickel, that slot corner role that we're starting to see teams really embrace, or using him more as a blitzer? I think that big nickel role could allow him to do that. So I'd be fascinated to see what this could potentially do for a Seattle defense. Pittsburgh Steelers, O'Cyrus Torrence. This would probably be the first time I got to say, like, I don't know, Jordan. Like, I'm not crazy about this one. I think Pittsburgh has done a fair amount trying to improve that interior offensive line. You sign a James Daniels. I still believe in Kevin Dotson. Mason Cole, maybe not the long-term guy, so this could give you the option of, hey, we're going to play James Daniels at center. Maybe, I'm not crazy about this pick. I'd rather it be a tackle, right? Like, I'd rather, if you're going to go offensive line, give me a left tackle. But at this point, I guess we do have Broderick Jones, Parents Johnson Jr., and Peter Skoronski off the board. And 17 is probably a little too rich for Anton Harrison, despite how much I do like him. So I understand that. But also, like, Keely Ringo's available here. Christian Gonzalez is available. So if you can't get a left tackle instead of interior offensive line, I'd go corner here for Pittsburgh. But that's just me, especially when you look at that Pittsburgh secondary, man, like, who is the guy long-term as well? Like, it's not only a need now, but it's going to be a long-term need for this team. But O'Cyrus Torrence, hey, best guard in my opinion in this class. So been great at Florida. One of those guys who just followed Billy Napier from Louisiana Lafayette to Florida. And I think his play's been stellar this year. So like the player, mid-first round, could certainly be in the cards, but I don't know about going to Pittsburgh. The Detroit Lions, okay, maybe two in a row here where I'm not quite on the same page. I think Jamal Williams and DeAndre Swift are a good enough tandem. And I just look at that Detroit defense. So, like, going back, they took Brian Brzee with that first selection, and it's like, okay, man, if you were to pair Brzee with, let's just say, Christian Gonzalez, it's like, all right, now you got some extra, ammunition for the pass rush, but also you're adding a potential CB1 and a guy to help out Jeff Okudah in the back end in that CB room. Okay. Now I'm on board. Or if you added, a corner and then a Trent Simpson. Okay, cool. Now the coverage unit should be a lot better. Pass rush and then running back. Yeah, I'm not quite on that wavelength. Maybe Dan Campbell biting kneecaps. I'd be interested to see if they were to somehow keep Ben Johnson as the OC. What could a guy like that do with Bijan Robinson? That would be fascinating. So maybe, I don't know about that. So the last two couple of picks, I'm like, iffy on. Green Bay, hey, it's another mock draft with Michael Mayer going to the Packers. For so long now, I've been saying, hey, Green Bay Pants, I promise I'm going to find you something else. But at this point, I look at that roster and I'm like, man, other than Michael Mayer, I don't know what route to go. This team needs, in my opinion, Michael Mayer. It's a clear upgrade over Mercedes Lewis and Robert Tonyan. And the way that secondary's been playing, we'll have to see how the safety contracts end up playing out once we get to the offseason. But yeah, Michael Mayer to me kind of fits best player available and team need in a really high level here for Green Bay. So love this addition. Obviously, I've been doing it a ton. So right there with you, Jordan. That kind of snaps the streak of me kind of, do I like that? Not really. Let me get to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Keely Ringo. I think this could totally be a Todd Bowles type of corner. Ringo gave up that touchdown that I was talking about earlier to Marvin Harrison Jr. So this year's been a little bit of a step back for Ringo, but I still look at a guy who last season played at an even higher level. And then, quarterback play can be variable. So defense, obviously you're reacting to a guy across from you. So it can be up and down. So the fact that he's played at a higher level, doesn't dissuade me that, he's fallen off or anything. That's just, hey, that's the position. But I've seen him play it at a pretty high level. 6'2", I think he'll run the 4.3s, long arms. There's so many traits and so many boxes he checks that, I still think he's a first rounder, even if his play this year has been maybe a little disappointing. And for Tampa Bay, can you keep Jamel Dean and Sean Murphy-Bunting? I'm not sure. I'd also love a Brian Branch here, if I can throw that out there. Because to me, if you're going to sign Dean or Murphy-Bunting, Dean's been better and he plays on the perimeter. So then adding in a Brian Branch to be that nickel strong safety type, you kind of already have that with Antoine Winfield Jr., but imagine the defense with Antoine Winfield Jr. and Brian Branch just flying around causing chaos. That could be fun. So like the Keely Ringo addition here, because they might be needing two cornerbacks to be added this offseason depending on how those contracts play out. But Ringo, still think he's that first round talent. Still think the potential's there, and I think this is a potential need. Next up, Jacksonville Jaguars. And hey, now we're starting to get this run on corners, and I've been looking to try to add a corner to Jacksonville, but I tend to have the guys off the board the way Reid has kind of built this mock, I dig. Tampa Bay needs a corner, like them being able to get a Keely Ringo, and for the Jags, like pairing up a Christian Gonzalez with a Tyson Campbell, who's been awesome this year. I think Shaq Griffin could be a cap casualty. I think Darius Williams could be a cap casualty for Jacksonville, because this team is projected over the cap next season. So they're going to have to make some moves to free up some money. And I think those two corners might unfortunately be the guys out. So Christian Gonzalez, add him in the mix, and a guy who's 6'2", again, going to probably run in the 4.3s, insane arm length. A lot of these corners kind of check all those boxes. Love to see him paired up with Tyson Campbell, and that could make that secondary, with a defense that has Josh Allen and hopefully Travon Walker taking steps in the right direction. Man, all of a sudden, those two big, physical, can get you at the line of scrimmage type of corners, it can be tough to play that Jags defense, and that's an offense that's pouring points on the board, so look out, Jacksonville. I mean, hey, I think they win the South for a reason this year. New York Giants, hey, there's another pick I love here, Jordan Addison. I think I've been able to do this in one of my mocks so far. This just screams a perfect fit for what the Giants need, right? Like, they need that number one wide receiver. I've been saying this the last couple of weeks where it's like, when it's, Richie James leading your team in targets, wide receiver feels like a pretty safe spot to be looking at. And to me, it's tough because, like, this team could go quarterback in the draft, but I'm also looking at corner, and wide receiver has huge needs. So, that's the kind of the tough part about over exceeding expectations this year, because I'd love to have this team not only with a higher first round pick, but a higher second round pick, and maybe knock off two of those three needs, and then we'll figure out the third. But yeah, if they were to have Addison fall into their lap here in the early 20s, great route runner. The hands are a little spotty at times, but I still believe he has wide receiver one potential. And all of a sudden, everybody else's role gets a little bit easier. Maybe you can also add some of the free agency and then kind of reshape that wide receiver room. Maybe you can move on from the Kenny Golladay contract as well. But I think this is a guy that's going to get open at a high level, and could be, I'm not calling him Stephon Diggs, but Brian Daboll's kind of meeting Stephon Diggs here in New York. So I like that pick, and I love the value a ton. Baltimore Ravens, JSN, I think I've done this in each of my last two mocks. I'm not convinced JSN is going to be a first rounder, if I'm honest with you. Top of the second round, I think, is a great spot for him and a great, landing value, just because the athleticism's not really there. That being said, Baltimore could be appealing just because this dude doesn't need that athleticism. You can lean on his football IQ, good route runner, finds soft spots and zones, and I'm not saying he's Juju Smith-Schuster, but, the Ravens were in on Juju each of the last two times he's been a free agent, and I could see them just being like, you know what, JSN does enough of that, right? Like, he could be our Juju Smith-Schuster. That said, but my problem with this is I am having to go back to 2021 because I don't have 2022 numbers in front of me, but 2021, Baltimore ran the third fewest three receiver sets as a percentage of their offense. Third fewest in the league. And I don't see that changing in 2022, especially with a whole lot of Tyler Huntley under center this year. So this is a team that doesn't use a whole lot of three receiver sets, and the reason I bring that up, JSN's done a ton from the slot, and I haven't really seen anything that suggests this guy's going to be able to do it on the outside, especially given the lack of high-end athleticism. So maybe this type of selection would force Greg Roman to change a couple things in the playbook, or it just force JSN to figure out how to play on the outside. I'd be curious. Part of that makes me cautious about this potential fit, but nonetheless, the Ravens need a receiver really bad. So hey, go ahead and take a swing of the bat here. LA Chargers, Jalen Hyatt. So I had this in my last mock, but I had Hyatt as a second rounder. And yeah, I don't know if he's a first rounder, man. That Josh Heupel offense asks him to do very little when it comes to a route tree, and it's so explosive that, yeah, you look at the numbers and it's like, oh yeah, that's a first round receiver with that speed. Yeah, get him in there. But it's like, the NFL loves guys who can run, a lot of different routes. Look at De'Ami Brown. Like, that was a guy who I thought maybe late one, early second. He ends up falling in the middle of the third. And I think in large part because his route tree was, 3 or 4 routes, right? Like verticals, a dig, maybe a post, and then a comeback off of that. It was basically those 4 routes. That's all UNC ever asked him to do. So I think that hurt his stock a ton, and I think you might see some of that with Jalen Hyatt. So now if you make this Zay Flowers, I could be entertained. Like, I think Zay Flowers may end up sneaking into the late first round. If not, I had him top of the second round. I think that's a great spot for him to go. Him and JSN, I think, really fit that top of the second round value at a really high level. I mean, Zay Flowers moves at a different level. I mean, especially looking at him this year at Boston College. He's also played a ton of football, great production, he can play inside and out. I mean, there's a lot to like about Zay Flowers. His speed, it may not be Jalen Hyatt per se, but he's also got great agility, great quickness. I mean, he does a lot of the same stuff, but also runs a little bit more of a diversified portfolio as a route runner. So I think if you make this Zay Flowers, I can be on board. Jalen Hyatt, I'm not sure he's going to be a first rounder. Minnesota Vikings, Cam Smith. I think this is a great value add here. and a part of the roster they desperately need. So kind of matches that BPA, but also team need value. You kind of find that sweet spot where both kind of align here. And like I said, I mean, Minnesota needs a corner bad. So, I mean, Cam Dantzler, Pat P can't play forever. If Dantzler and Cam Smith, that could be an interesting duo moving forward. A little handsy this year, 10 penalties against him. He had 5 over the last 2 seasons before the year that just wrapped for South Carolina. So, I wish that he continued to be a guy who's kind of, free those penalties, because that was something I really, really dug about him. Didn't get to play a whole lot of man press, but I do think he kind of has that skill set in him, despite not being able to see it a whole lot like we did with J.C. Horn. But nonetheless, I think this guy has the potential to be a really sticky man coverage corner, and I think the athleticism is going to be there. Can't wait to see what his combine numbers look like, but I think first round, if not early second, is a great spot to land a Cam Smith. Cincinnati Bengals, Lucas Van Ness. So I've had a couple mocks now where I've done a reaction to where he's been in the first round. I think it was the McShay mock that I did a couple weeks ago where he was going to Dallas. So interesting. Still not a guy I've gotten to watch all of his tape and really dive into. So, I can't give you a full scouting report, but I know he does, have a lot of strength into his profile. So adding him to the mix for Cincinnati could be interesting. Also, Sam Hubbard and Trey Hendrickson, I think, both become free agents at the same year, 2024, maybe it's 25. I have to see, does he mention it here? He does not. Oh, 2024. Yeah, so that could be another interesting reason to just add this depth. You also have, not Drew Sample, kid from Tulane, Jordan Sample. Anyways, he's an additional edge rusher with depth. Joseph Osai, kind of this edge rusher, off-ball linebacker from Texas. They were both drafted together, him and Sample. So they could be options as well, but this could be just stockpiling for a potential need. I think this team could also do the same thing with corner, right? Like I think eventually that's going to become a need in a year or two. So, edge, corner, I'm fine with either one of those plays for Cincinnati. Denver Broncos, I think right tackle is one of their biggest positions in need, and Darnell Wright didn't allow a sack this year at Tennessee. Playing at that right tackle spot really took his game to another level. Again, the Josh Heupel offense, I think, keeps him clean to a pretty high degree, but nonetheless, value with team need makes a lot of sense. I think he's played really, really well. And I think this late first round, because I think that being said, I think Anton Harrison's a better player. But if you are specifically looking for a right tackle, Darnell Wright, you don't need to move him. Like plug and play right here. So I understand it from that perspective. But it is interesting. You get past those top 3 tackles, Skoronski, Paris Johnson Jr., and Broderick Jones. I still like Anton Harrison, but there's probably a half step down in most people's eyes from those 3 to Anton Harrison. And then to me, there's another half step down, maybe even a full step down to when you get to a Darnell Wright, the mock kid from North Dakota State, whose name is escaping, Taylor Mock, I think. But, this tackle class has got a lot to be figured out, right? Like, I think the depth of it, really, like who are the guys that are going to be drafted in the second round? Blake Freeland in that conversation as well. There's still a lot to be sorted out there for this tackle class. Anyways, moving on. Dallas Cowboys. Devon Witherspoon. Another spoiler for my potential cornerback rankings. I think this could be a guy in my top 3. I mean, he played great this year at Illinois. He allowed 1 yard in press coverage this year. I mean, what kind of a stat is that? That is unbelievable. So he really balled out at Illinois, and also 6'1". He has that size. He may not be the 6'2", and crazy arm length like a Ringo, Gonzalez, and Porter, but he ain't much smaller, right? And he ain't that much shorter. So big fan of Devon Witherspoon. And you add him into the Dallas defense, have him opposite of Trevon Diggs with that pass rush, with Micah Parsons just being a game wrecker. Dallas' defense is already scary, man. If they get a legit number 2 corner in the mix, I don't even know how to describe that defense at that point. So love that pick, and I think at 28, that's some great value there. Buffalo Bills, Brian Branch. I talked about it earlier. I'd love to see him go to Tampa, but here for Buffalo, this could be an upgrade over Teron Johnson. And of course, obviously, still thinking about DeMar Hamlin, but safety could potentially be a need. I think Branch could fill one of those 2 spots as, a strong safety nickel corner type. Could also, he's such a good athlete. If you were to play split safety looks with him moving forward, I think he could do it. So like this addition. I like the value here at 29 as well. We'll have to see how that, secondary, is Micah Hyde going to come back and play next year too? So there's still a lot to be, figured out there for the Bills secondary, but I like the value with Brian Branch. 2 picks ago, BJ Ojulari. This is a pick that at this point, I'm starting to be convinced that this is going to be their selection here, wherever the Chiefs are picking, because I just love the idea of adding that speed finesse guy, BJ Ojulari, opposite of George Karlaftis. Back-to-back years, you're taking these first-round edge rushers. I'm here for it. And, Kansas City's can play a lot of games from ahead, right? Like, getting that pass rush, I think, is the number 1 priority for that defense. So adding an Ojulari, who I think was really, really good this year at LSU, and of course, obviously, younger brother of Azeez Ojulari, who's been a solid player at the NFL level through 2 years for the Giants. So, really love this addition for the Chiefs, and I think it's just the edge rusher I want to see them add. Last pick, Philadelphia Eagles take Clark Phillips. This is the one I've had adding a ton of mock drafts. So, hey, can't knock it here. Jordan Reid, I like the value here. James Bradberry going to be a free agent. Clark Phillips, the thing is, and I've been saying this all year now, I'm starting to see more people talk about it, about 5'10", 180 pounds. I'm interested to see where the arm length comes in. He could be this year's kind of Roger McCray, where it's like you see the arm length and all of a sudden it's like, yeah, you don't see great physicality on tape. He may get pushed around from time to time. He may become a second-round corner pretty quickly, and that's kind of where I think the value is. But that being said, this guy does have some ball hawk in him, and I think playing in a zone-heavy defense, if Jonathan Gallon's still going to be the DC, he'd be a really intriguing fit. And plus, cornerback to me, I mean, Darius Slay, wrong side of 30. Bradbury's going to be a free agent, also, getting up there in age. This is a position to address for the future. And now you look at this Eagles first-round, Jared Verse and Clark Phillips. Not only are those players who can make an impact pretty soon, but, I mean, long-term, you're just keeping yourself in a great position to keep that roster health, especially on the defensive side, at a high level. Because then once, let's say James Bradberry doesn't come back, okay, cool, we have an option to fill that in. Or when, Josh Sweat gets another big deal and he goes elsewhere, or Brandon Graham finally retires and stops getting 10 sacks in a season at his age, Jared Verse is ready to step in. So, love that pick. And, all in all, this mock, outside of where it was like 17 and 18, the Lions pick. Other than that, yeah, I mean, yeah. Bijan going 18 here, and then O'Cyrus Torrence to the Steelers. I like the value, I like the placement of O'Cyrus Torrence, but Pittsburgh I don't think is really the fit. And then Bijan to the Lions, I'm not crazy about that. But those are really the only two picks where I'm like, I think I'd go elsewhere. All in all, I think Jordan Reid did a great job with this. I'm going to go with a 92. A solid A- here for Jordan Reid. But let me hear your grade for this mock draft. A lot of people, Broshmo, and Hail Mary Sports, they do mock the mock. I like to do grade the mock. So let me know what you would grade this mock draft down below in the comment section. What do you think of Jordan's first mock draft of the season? Hopefully you all enjoyed today's video. If you did, be sure to hit that like button. It would help me out a ton. You're out here, want to see more draft content. We're going to be cranking it up a ton over this offseason. So be sure to hit that big red subscribe button if that at all interests you. But that is going to do it for me. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Until next time, my name is Tej, and I'm signing off.